So this particular week, what I was going to do is touch on a paragraph that it's actually one of the less incendiary paragraphs in the big book of bullshit or the big book of lies or just the cult text that everybody believes is inspired by the divine authority of AA God and AA higher power, even though it's not a religion and even though it's just a suggested program and you can believe whatever you want in the cult, right? But it points to what I think is a bigger problem that I noticed in AA during all my time in there, and it's I think I'll just start with it, and I'll kind of see where I go. But it's a tiny little paragraph, and it's amazing to me, continually amazing to me, how Bill W. cannot write three fucking sentences without totally, utterly committing all kinds of logical fallacies and silly assertions and other things. But it's the part in A Vision for You where he says, and now and then a serious drinker, being dry at the moment, says, I don't miss it at all, feel better, work better, having a better time. As ex-problem drinkers, we smile at such a sally. Right there is a problem. Why are you gonna... You do realize if you're trying to overcome an addiction that has probably been a dominant part of your life for a very long time, you are going to have to give yourself the exact kinds of pep talks that this guy that he's hypothetically describing is going to have to do. If you're struggling to overcome an addiction, I'm sure there are days where you do want to engage in or indulge in that addiction, but you kind of tell yourself, well, I'm feeling better. Well, things are going a little bit better. Hell, I don't really miss it that much. There's nothing fucking wrong with doing that. Okay? The times that I had been tempted to go get drunk after leaving AA, one of the things that stopped me from doing that primarily was my fear of ending up on another 2 and 3 month long bender that I couldn't keep going through. It was the primary fear of, oh my God, I don't want to go down that fucking horrible fucking abyss where I'm rolling out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm having to guzzle vodka just to get to where I can stop vomiting and shaking all over the place and crawl out of bed. That motivated me in my early days until, eventually as time passed, there came a day where I just kind of realized, I just don't really feel like drinking any longer. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with a serious drinker. You notice he doesn't want to call him an alcoholic. Being dry, saying, I feel better. I don't miss it. There's nothing wrong with that. But piece of fucking shit that Bill W. is, he thinks it's funny that somebody would try to do that probably because if somebody's doing that, they haven't fallen for his stupid fucking cult religion. But I'll continue on. We know our friend is like a boy whistling in the dark to keep up his spirits. What's wrong with that? I heard this read in meetings over and over again during all my 10 years in AA, and it never occurred to me to ask, so what? What's wrong with trying to keep your spirits up? What's wrong with telling yourself, I'm not really afraid of the abandoned home that I got to pass after in the dark, when I'm coming home from a friend's house as a little kid? I mean, I don't actually see what's wrong with that. I mean, giving yourself a pep talk, telling yourself, there was a movie, Ghost in the Darkness, about lions in Africa. It didn't get that many high ratings. I actually thought it was not that bad. I thought it was actually kind of decent. But there's a scene where Michael Douglas says to Val Kilmer, I'm going to go out here with these natives and I'm going to do exactly what they're doing right now. I'm going to tell myself I'm not afraid. I don't really see what's wrong with that. There's nothing inherently bad about trying to tell yourself I'm not as scared as I really feel like I am if it's going to give you enough courage to move forward. But Bill W. is acting like there's something bad wrong with you here. But I haven't got to the overall bigger picture to this yet. Inwardly, he would give anything to take a half a dozen drinks and get away with them. Well, of course he would. Of course anybody would. When you're trying to break a cycle of addiction that has been with you for a large portion of your life, or has been with you for a very large portion of time, where it's something that you rely on, where it's something you fall back on, where it's something you indulge in when you need to, or in my particular case, towards the end of my drinking career, I guess you could call it, during those benders, it was a necessity. There was no roll out of bed at 5 a.m. and, I'm just not going to drink right now. There was roll out of bed at 5 a.m. and my hand is doing like this, and I'm throwing up and dry heaving, and I'm holding the bottle with two fucking hands, barely getting it to my mouth, and then trying to keep from vomiting so I could get enough of a buzz to function, and then, of course, I'm going to guzzle more. There was no choice in sobriety at that point. But when you are just simply addicted to something and you're trying to break the habit of it and you're trying to get past it, what the fuck is wrong with trying to keep your spirits up? What's wrong with getting off work and saying, you know, I sure wished I could go down to that bar down there and slam a few and listen to the jukebox like I've been doing for decades now, but you know, I know I'm doing the right thing by not doing that. I know I'm going to save some money. I know that I'm going to not have a hangover in the morning. I know that that's not, you know what, I don't think I'm going to do that because I don't really miss it. I just really don't. I don't see a fucking thing wrong with that at all. He's acting like you're doing something terrible. If you keep it to yourself deep down inside, this notion of, man, I'd love to drink right now, but I'm just not going to. Of course, in AA meetings, when this is talked about, this is usually the part where some asshole says, yeah, it says right there in chapter 3, we had to concede to our innermost self, you know. There is no conceding to my innermost self, okay? You know, they act like there's some big, complicated fucking mystery to doing that. The truth of the matter is, I think in general, I'm speaking in a generality, I'm not making an assertion, there could be exceptions, but I think on a general rule, when you're trying to quit an addiction, there is a part of you that's going to miss and mourn that addiction. There is a part of you that's going to say, that addiction is really bad for me, but when I engage in that addiction, indulge in that addiction, participate in that addiction, it leads me to such negative consequences that I really need to stop doing it and I really need to stay away from it. You know, the same reason I'm staying away from candy right now. The same reason why I'm a little bit happy that I've gone down a grand total of, I was almost a 7, but I went up one this morning, but I'm down 6, right? A part of me would love to go to the supermarket and buy a whole bunch of Kit Kats and ice cream and go to town with it. But I'm just telling myself, yeah, but I'm happier exercising. I'm happier. And I kind of am in some way. But it's no different with your addiction, with your drinking, with your boozing, or with your drug, or whatever it is. Of course, deep down inside, when you're first quitting it, you're going to want to do it. Of course, deep down inside, you're going to crave it. There were times that in spite of all the bad benders I was on, in spite of all the negative consequences that I accrued as a result of my drinking, when I finally quit drinking for good, which I didn't know it was going to be for good, I kind of didn't know how long I was going to be without it, a part of me still wanted it. And again, I don't see a fucking thing wrong with giving yourself a pep talk in order to get through it. Because now, I'm not inwardly wishing I could drink. Now, I'm pretty happy without alcohol. Now, I'm fairly confident that I'm not going to drink anytime soon. Now, I'm fairly happy without boozing myself to death. Now, I'm not going through that. But I had to give myself little pep talks along the way, or just plain flat out fear of ending up in a 3-month bender again. And those are fucking horrible. If you've ever been through one of those, you know what I'm talking about, where you're laying awake at 3 a.m. and you're fucking hallucinating and you're hearing shit in the hallway. I'm not talking about the full-blown DTs. I could tell you a story about that, but there's no real need to. But you know what I'm talking about, when you're sweating and you're nervous and you're anxiety-ridden and you're nauseous and you can't sleep, you can't eat, you're afraid of everything. Okay, the sound of a television being turned up too loud is enough to send you into a panic attack. When you're going through those kinds of withdrawals, there is a part of you saying, man, I'm never going to do this again. And then when you start feeling better, yeah. But the fear of that can motivate you to stay away from it. Just like giving yourself a pep talk or being the schoolboy whistling in the dark past the abandoned house on the way home in his neighborhood after dark gives him the courage to do that. There's no problem here. But then he goes on to say he will presently try the old game again, for he isn't happy about his sobriety. You fucking asshole. What gives you the right to tell people what's going to happen to them? What gives you the right to tell someone who's struggling like that, which could be the one thing they need to actually engage in going back into that addiction again? What gives you the fucking right to tell them that? You know, if you were struggling right now, if you've only got a couple of weeks without your liquor or your drug or whatever it is, and I came up to you and I said, you're going to try it again. You're going to try it again because you're not happy with it. Well, I think if somebody did that to me, now that I'm not in AA any longer, I'd tell them to fuck off. But at the same time, if that's what you're surrounded by, Just like toxic family members that I had in my life that was more than happy to remind me every chance they got, oh, you're going to drink again. You're going to drink again. I know you're going to drink again because you're a drunk. You'll always be a drunk, you know. Yeah, that's enough to tip someone if they're in a fragile state. Now, of course, AA people and society in general say, no, nothing can make you drink if you don't want to. Yeah, well, that isn't helping any either. But, he cannot picture life without alcohol. Well, again, that's how it is when you first break an addiction. There was a time in my life that the idea of living months and years at a time without getting loaded or wasted or drinking seemed impossible. It doesn't seem like that anymore. Of course, in early addiction, you can't picture life without alcohol. This is a fucking selling point for Bill W.'s religion. But I will get to the wider scope here. Someday he will be unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without it. Then he will know loneliness such as few do. Oh, you're so fucking dramatic, Bill. What you really mean is he has to join my fucking cult, you know. He will be at the jumping off place. He will wish for the end. Yeah, I've been through that a million times. And reading shit like that in meetings didn't help me at all. But I can say that one thing that points to me is a much larger problem that I've seen in AA, and that's this idea that AA has some ability to know your motivations, to read your mind, and to know exactly what you're thinking or feeling at any given moment. For example, take that part in the book where he says, deep down inside every man, woman, and child is a fundamental idea of God. That's a dishonest statement for one thing, because you couldn't possibly know that. But let me ask you this question. If I stood up here and I just opened up with the assertion, deep down inside, every man, woman, and child is an atheist. They all know religion's bullshit. Deep down inside, they know it, whether they like to admit it or not. They all got doubts, so therefore they're all atheists. Does that make me a credible authority to say that? Does that give me any leeway as far as being an expert on what every man, woman, and child thinks? If I told you right now every man, woman, and child is secretly an atheist, they don't believe none of that religious bullshit, does that make me any kind of authority to make that claim? I have no authority to make that claim any more than he has the authority to claim every man, woman, and child secretly believes in his weird, twisted, fucking religious AA God. But this is a type of thinking that I've noticed among AA members. Like I had a sponsor one time towards the end when I was really falling apart, that fat piece of shit I've talked about on here before, where I had said, this program is all bullshit. And this was really, really close to the end, and I won't go into the long soap opera drama of what happened there, but he said, well, secretly deep down inside, you know I'm telling the truth. You know AA is real. Okay? Secretly deep down inside, you know this. Secretly you feel this. It's a bizarre way to try to read people, or it's a bizarre way to counter your never-minded worldview if you're going to appeal to this idea that everybody deep down inside thinks just like you. It's if somebody came up to me on the streets or somebody I encountered and they told me that they were, say, Catholic. I was Catholic for many years, and they told me that they prayed the rosary, and they told me they go to Mass, and they told me they go to confession, and they told me they wholeheartedly believe in all of that stuff. There is nothing to give me any reason or any claim or any groundwork to say, well, no, deep down inside, you know that's all bullshit, don't you? I used to be Catholic, and I can say this with authority. Deep down inside, you don't really believe that. You know it's bullshit. I don't have any evidence to make that statement because I can't possibly know the motivations of what that person is thinking. I can know that when I was a Catholic, I 100% believed in every bit of that. I know for a fact what I believed as a Catholic, and I totally accepted all the dogma that came with the Catholic Church. But I guess if you really wanted to, you could have said because I had doubts, deep down inside, you know that's not true. First of all, you're trying to question a motivation of what someone thinks, which you can't possibly do. You can't possibly know the motivations of somebody outside of that person's own motivations. The only way that you could possibly demonstrate that that person secretly knows that's bullshit is if they do something in their behaviors to counter what they're preaching. For example, the old fat pile of shit sponsor of mine used to talk about, See, today I stand flat-footed and tell the truth when I really feel like lying. And a part of me always wanted to say, well, when do you do that? Do you do that after you've ripped off these people with their food stamps, where you pay them for $20 worth of food stamps and you just max the card out completely and there's nothing they can do about it because they're living on the streets and they're drug addicts? Is that the kind of truth that you like to tell? Is it, how about the part where you steal from your sponsees, you call their wives and repeat their fist steps to them, and you cause all kinds of turmoil in their homes, and then you sit in here and talk about telling the truth and being honest and being humble? Yeah, you have demonstrated in your behaviors and your actions that you don't really believe the bullshit you're preaching in AA. But if I did not know this man at all, if I didn't know what he does in his private life, if I didn't know anything about him, and he had told me that, he tried to be honest today. Now, if he was an AA member, anybody who's an AA member goes on my suspect list automatically. Unfortunately, that's a bias due to everything I saw over the years there. But if I met a man on the street and he said, I tried to tell the truth today, which would be a weird admission anyway, but I would have no reason to actually doubt what he's saying because he has demonstrated nothing to me to show contrary to that. To make a grandiose claim that somebody quitting drinking secretly is going to do it again because they secretly know they want to drink again, that everybody really believes in Bill W. as God because secretly they know he's telling the truth, is something you cannot prove, and it's something that you don't really have the authority to make the claim on because you don't know every man, woman, and child. You don't know what every guy who's trying to quit drinking, who's being dry at the moment, might be thinking to himself. Maybe he's not thinking to himself, I feel better, don't miss it. Maybe he's not inwardly wishing he could have 100,000 drinks. Maybe that guy is in a whole lot of pain and he's thinking, you know what? I got to stay off that booze because I was in the emergency room and my liver enzymes are so high that I know I'm bordering on cirrhosis. Maybe that's what the guy is thinking. You don't know and have no way of knowing or determining what somebody's thinking when they're coming off their booze or when they're coming off their addiction. You don't know. Even if they do say, I don't miss it, I feel better. You don't know that they're lying. You're making a claim to know something, the motivations of what someone else is thinking or feeling. It's a huge mistake that I've seen oftentimes in AA about things, like when someone says something and they come at you with, you only said that so you can feel good about yourself. Well, I could point out the blatant hypocrisy in that kind of statement because the person saying that is only smugly downing someone so they can feel good about themselves. I could point out the fact that AA members are quick to criticize everybody's motivations, but they have nothing to really base those motivations off of. Like I saw somebody, for instance, in a situation that actually bent over backwards to help somebody out in distress is the best way I know to describe it. I could tell you the story, but I'd have to do detail, and we don't really need all that to make the point. But I saw them bend over backwards to do something for someone in distress, and everybody said he only did that to make himself feel better. You have no way of knowing why he did that. In fact, the only way you're making that judgment would be if you're the kind of person who would only do something like that so you can feel better. But you have no way of reading the person's mind. You have no way of understanding his motivations. Maybe that person, let's use a ridiculous example. Maybe he bent over backwards for that person because they had damning information on him and was going to blackmail him with it. Maybe the reason he did that was for some motivation that we don't know or can see or tell, on the surface. You could make a reasonable guess on something, but that's not what AA does. Like if I see a guy who's performing on a stage with a microphone in his hand and he's coming up with one-liners back to back, I could say he just likes to hear people laugh. You could make a reasonable guess based on what you're observing, but that's not really what AA does. AA emphatically makes a grand judgment on everything that everybody does as though they're qualified to know what everybody's motivations are, to know what people are thinking and what's really motivating them. I had so many people, for example, when I brought it up in AA, that when I had said I was raised Catholic and I'm no longer a Catholic, they all assumed that I was mad at God. Well, see, you just got mad at God. That's all that happened. You just got mad at God. No, I fucking didn't. It didn't have anything to do with anger. It didn't have anything to do with a grudge or anything else. But I was told that repeatedly, well, the reason you have a problem with God is because God never did nothing for you. That's what it's really all about. No, asshole, you don't get to tell me what my past history was that you don't know anything about. You don't get to make a judgment about me based on nothing that you know about me, other than the fact that you think that that's what I fit the definition of, and you're trying to force me into that definition so that you can appear like you're an expert and think you're so much better than everybody else. Now, you could argue that I've made a lot of judgments about the way old-timers behave on here, but I can only say that I have seen the way those old-timers react both in the public and in the private atmosphere. I have seen their sneers. I've seen the way that they arrogantly pronounce people as being less than them. I remember one old timer everybody called on, for example, and everybody said, "Oh, it's not a meeting unless Jake speaks." And everybody said, "You need to talk to Jake, maybe. Stick with the winners." That's not his real name. I'm just making up a hypothetical here, but I sat down next to him in a meeting, and every time somebody would talk, he'd kind of sneer like that. He'd say, "They're not going to fucking make it. Tell you already, they're not going to fucking make it. They've got 3 white chips in a year. They're not going to fucking make it. They're going to be dead in a very short period of time." And then he would get called on, and he'd say, "And today it's all about helping the other alcoholic. It's about..." So, yeah, I am not so much, in my opinion, I don't feel like making judgments upon people I personally interacted with. People I personally interacted with, that it was very blatantly obvious that they were there to feed their own fucking grandiose ideas of themselves as being some kind of god in AA meetings because they had a coin with 2 numbers on it. I think some things are pretty obvious. Like if you see a guy standing on a sidewalk and he's peeing on the street and he's yelling at the sky and he's saying all kinds of crazy things, I don't think that that's a judgment to say, I think he's got mental issues. But again, I think that the differences between a judgment and the differences between the mind reading appeal to motivations that AA does is daylight and dark. There's a difference in you telling me what my real motivations are, what I really think, what I really want, what I really desire, why I really can't get sober, without any evidence whatsoever, versus me making a judgment based on what I've seen and observed. But I think if you're around cult members long enough, you might confuse that, because cults prey on ordinary human emotions. They prey on the logical fallacies that make up most of our reasoning. We're not as swift of reasoning creatures as human beings, that sometimes that we might try to give ourselves credit for. Otherwise, nobody would fall for the cult. And I had, I think, one other point I was going to make about trying to tell people what they think and what they know, but I think I pretty much demonstrated what I was talking about. Chime in on the comments. Let me know. In fact, before I finish, there was a subscriber who brought up a very good point. He said he was talking to a lady one time, and they all accused him of trying to 13-step her or rape her or something like that. And as a matter of fact, I had something like that happen to me one time. There was a lady that was sharing in a meeting about her factory closing down, and I realized she worked for the same company I did. And at the time, we were all worried about layoffs. We were all worried about, the future of the company itself. By the way, spoiler alert, it closed and thousands of people were put out of work. But I walked up to her after the meeting. I walked up to her for that reason alone. In fact, this demonstrates kind of what this whole video was about. I walked up to her after the meeting. I said, "Do you work for World Color Printing, which recently merged with Quackaholics World Incorporated Printing?" She said, "Yeah, they've announced, massive layoffs. They said our plant's going to close in about 2 months. What have you heard?" And I said, "I haven't heard anything, and we were talking." Now, of course, I noticed she was pretty. Of course, I noticed she was attractive. But that was my main point in talking to her at that point. But every fucking old-timer shoved in front of me to try to get her away from me. And afterwards, they said, "You haven't even been sober 2 weeks. You're already trying to take some poor, vulnerable girl to bed. You're just a disgusting alcoholic." Yeah, fuck you. You were pushing in front of me because you were trying to 13-step over me. But that's not what I was trying to do. Honestly, I wanted to know if the printing factory I worked with, if we had any chance of saving our jobs. If you've ever been in that position, you know exactly what I was talking about. Anyway, chime in on the comments. Let me know some specific times that old timers tried to tell you what you really thought, what you really felt, what you were really motivated by, what you really, what you really feel. Because it's almost like in AA, it works like this. It's like you can't possibly be motivated or feel this way because it doesn't fit my narrow-minded worldview. You have to be motivated, think, and feel and act this way because then I can be right about everything all of the fucking time. Anyway, 25 minutes. I think I'm repeating myself at this point. See you guys next week.